My child couldn't get my citizenship just because I'm a woman.
We may have one win today, but there's still a lot to be done.
They are rejected for no real good reason at all.
You're playing with children's lives here. Hello everyone, welcome to Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. My name is Amalina Kamal, your host. For our returning audience, welcome back. And if you're new here, you're in for a treat because for today, we're going to go into a very important discussion. We're unpacking the latest groundbreaking development for Malaysian mothers and their overseas-born children. Now, for decades, Malaysian men had the automatic right to pass their citizenship to children born abroad, but women didn't. That meant thousands of children were left stateless, struggling with basic rights like education, healthcare, and even the ability to stay in Malaysia. Now, after years of citizenship advocacy, legal battles, as well as heartbreaking stories, a settlement has finally been reached. But before we get into that, let me just go ahead and introduce here on set President of Family Frontiers, Adlyn Adam Teoh. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you for having me.
Next to Adlyn, we've got Professor Gurdial Singh Nijar, the Legal Counsel of Family Frontiers. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
It's great to have you both here because I think for this particular week is pretty historic, sets the precedence for what's to come. Before that, we've also like to introduce one special individual for today. We've got specialist writer Elena Koshi here on Beyond the Headlines for the first time. Welcome, Elena.
Absolutely. So glad to be here. So glad that we get to discuss this.
Yeah. And I see that you brought something on the show today.
Oh, yes. This is the NST dated March 11th, and it has the win, Mum's Win Historic Judgment. What a win. And so glad it made the headlines.
Right, so
absolutely.
So from print to this set, we want to expand the discussion for our audience. So 18 children under 18 here, right, born overseas to Malaysian mothers can now apply for citizenship. Well, we all know on the surface level it's a massive win, but still there's challenges that may lie ahead. Adlyn, I want to go to you first. What does this victory actually mean for the years worth of legal battles, and not just for you or the Family Frontiers, the representatives, but for the Malaysian mothers at large?
Thank you for that question. It was truly historic what happened this week. Malaysian mothers will be able to apply for citizenship for their children, and their children will be eligible to receive Malaysian citizenship. Now, this issue has existed for many, many years. You've heard about this legal battle for 5 years only, right? But this issue has been here since Merdeka, since our country was founded. Women never had the right to confer citizenship on an automatic basis to their children who are born overseas. And I myself am an impacted mother, right? I had my child in Beijing, and unfortunately my child couldn't get my citizenship just because I'm a woman.
Right.
How fair is that, right? And as we know, last year, October 2024, in the Dewan Rakyat, the constitutional amendment was passed, and subsequently in the Senate, it was also voted on positively and unanimously in December 2024. We are waiting for the gazetting and implementation of the law, right? So this constitutional amendment actually covers children who will be born after the law is implemented. What the court addressed early this week was, what about the children who are already born, who are right, who are here, who are already, who are with their mothers, who want to come back to Malaysia, or who are in Malaysia, who can't have citizenship, right? And so this addresses that gap. We're so happy. The mothers are thrilled, and trust me, they had tears of joy, right? If you were there in the courtroom, you would have seen outside the courtroom, all the mothers were hugging. We've gone through this tremendous journey together, and we are so glad to see a wonderful, wonderful end to it, right? Now, there is a sad part to this, is that while this would benefit future mothers and also present mothers, unfortunately, there is a group of people who will not benefit from this. And this would be the children who have essentially aged out.
Right.
right? Those are the children that have passed 18 years old. They won't be able to apply for citizenship under Article 15 too. And for those, we want to see if there can be other remedies for them.
But I suppose this will set the precedence for more discussions, more dialogues, more reforms, I believe, right? We will get into that, but I want to cue to Elena, or at least bring the attention to you. So previously, you've reported on this particular issue. You've met with a lot of mothers, right, to talk about their plight. Maybe there's certain takeaways that you'd like to highlight across to the show so that our audience can understand the scale of this situation.
Thank you for having me here. One of the things that I was struck by, I think prior to this, was the numbers, the statistics. Because according to UNHCR, Malaysia was one of just 25 countries that denied women the right to pass on their nationality to their children on equal terms with men. Now, today we are talking about women and their right to confer citizenship. But there is also another thing that we are one of only 3 countries that deny fathers the same right for children born out of wedlock. So the deeper I delved into the issue, and the clearer it became that citizenship laws here, especially, are painfully complex. I mean, we may have one win today, but there's still a lot to be done. And, it's not the end all and be all of things. So, yes, there's been a hard-fought win, but it's not enough, and so much more needs to be done. Like what you said, Adlyn, about children above the age of 18. So much more needs to be done to fix that injustice.
Yeah, there's certain pockets of our society, of our community, that's still being overlooked, and we want to address these individuals or their plight as well. We do not want to have to excel and progress and forget about those who are probably voiceless, probably don't even have representatives.
I mean, it's a long overdue step in the right direction, but it's not a fix-all. So it still leaves behind, like what you said, those who have already turned 18, young adults who have spent their entire lives stateless, now being forced to navigate an unforgiving system with fewer options. So much needs to be done.
Yeah, but then, going back to this particular landmark ruling, right, Professor, I want to understand from a legal standpoint, what was the key turning point that actually led to this settlement? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, she started back in 2020, then 2021, while the High Court was in favour, then the Court of Appeal then retracted but next year, right? And then now, because we go to the federal court level, and it's for the push, what does that mean? What was the key indicator?
At the heart of this whole episode is the plight of children. Because these children did not choose to be born where they were born or with whom they were born. And it's the plight of the children that has tugged at the heartstrings of the Malaysian public, including the members of parliament, whether they're in the opposition or in the government, and ordinary citizens. This issue of the plight, to overcome the plight of the children, has been at the center of the warm embrace by the public that cries out for a solution. So this, as Adlyn has explained, is a decades-old problem. Starting from the time the Constitution came into being, there was these provisions which discriminated against Malaysian mothers, children born of Malaysian mothers overseas. And it was a decades-long problem which remained unresolved. And then the trigger was when they had an amendment in 2001 where the government amended the law to say that discrimination on the basis of gender is also prohibited. And so on the basis of that, some of us, lawyers, who heard of the plight of these mothers who had been in this situation, or the children who had been in this sad, tragic, caught up in this tragic milieu, that triggered us to say that we must do something about it and file an action.
Mm-hmm.
And it took us 5 long legal years of battle in the courts to finally arrive at this. We were opposed at every step of the way. And it is sad because, the Attorney General's chambers, which is supposed to act in the public interest, for some reason thought that our case was not worthy of a solution, you see. And all that we were talking about is very fundamental. There is a large number of, as you have explained, there are a large number of children who are born in this country of Malaysian parentage who are just excluded, who are made invisible. They have no rights, they're not citizens, and they can't do anything. And this includes children born overseas of Malaysian mothers, married to foreigners. It also includes children born out of wedlock, out of the formal wedlock, which is the registration of marriage. But many of them, as we know, our culture allows, in fact, our culture allows for marriage through custom. So they get married in temples, in estates, or in little towns, and so on and so forth, and they consider themselves married. They don't, and they have children. They don't consider that that child is born out of wedlock. But those children are also not given citizenship rights. In fact, they are told that they follow the nationality or citizenship of their mother, which is fine, except that when a marriage breaks up and some of these foreign mothers disappear into the wilderness, back to their country, like Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and so on and so forth, the child is left destitute, and the child is left with the male parent. But the Constitution says that he has no right. He has to follow the nationality of the mother.
Basically stateless in this context, right?
Yes.
So do you mean that, Professor, if I may, do you think with this victory it should set, I suppose, a pathway to automatic, I suppose, recognition of citizenship for Malaysian-born children, I suppose?
Well, we hope so, because I think what this settlement shows, the Attorney General's chambers, which started out by fighting us, has finally settled with us. So there is a softening and an empathetic attitude, I think, that the government, that this Madani government, has taken towards children who are left in this sorry state of affairs. So the first step is this particular settlement for Malaysian mothers. But what we anticipate is that the government will now consider the rest of the cases which affect children who are rendered, like I say, rendered invisible. They have no status in this country. They cannot apply for a passport. They cannot get the services. They cannot get education in the normal way that normal Malaysian children get. They can't go for health care and a whole host. And when they come of age, they can't get a job because they're not citizens. They don't have an IC. So they're left as people with they're rendered invisible. And this is very serious problem, because we are not talking about a few children. We are talking about thousands of children in this predicament. And so I think the government is beginning to realize that they need to take a more compassionate attitude and harness the energy of these young children who, through no fault of theirs, have been put in this predicament.
Based on your own knowledge, I just want to understand, do you have some sort of visibility on how this case would impact, future or similar cases that's not related to the current one?
Well, first is that there is children under 18. So they are now given citizenship under the amendment that has been put forward, or existing born children. The next step is those who have crossed that 18 age barrier.
Those who have aged out,
yes, because they've applied 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and so on. But because of the fact that they were not granted citizenship, they have phased out of the 18 years, and so they are no longer citizens. They cannot apply for citizenship under this ruling. But so there is a scope for this transitional kind of a position, which we hope to impress upon the Attorney General's chambers and the minister concerned, that these children also deserve that same treatment, because it is through no fault of theirs that they were aged out of the of this requirement. Then of course we have children who are much older and who are not citizens or have acquired citizenship of other countries out of sheer necessity, because they are not accorded citizenship rights in this country. They can't function. So they move somewhere and then try to, get permanent resident status in Australia or the US or Europe and so on.
Professor, what are their legal recourse for those who are above 18 and who have constantly been trying to get citizenship year after year, application after application? What would be their legal recourse?
I think under the Constitution, you are allowed for citizenship by naturalization. So after a period of time, when you can show that your commitment is to this country and you have been with this country in all these years, then there is a fundamental right, in our view, to have their applications treated sympathetically and to be granted citizenship.
But it's a lot more difficult to obtain citizenship through that
Yes.
legal process.
Yes,
Am
it
I
is.
right?
It will be based on the discretion of the authorities. But you see, discretion is cannot be exercised arbitrarily in law. So it has to be exercised in a way that is judicious and that is in accord with in proportion to the aim of the federal constitution to actually grant citizenship to children. So there will be recourse if they are rejected for no real good reason at all. In other words, the discretion is not exercised in a way that is fair and just. There will be a remedy.
Right. Just to explain it simply for our audience, what would the examples be, for instance, in real case scenarios?
In real cases, for example, someone who's lived all his life here, was born here and lived all his life here, and has contributed to the services in this country, when he applies for citizenship under registration, he's entitled to be, the application must be treated fairly. That is a principle of law. And fairly means if he's going to be rejected, there must be good grounds for rejection. If there are no good grounds for his application to be treated fairly, then you can go to court and challenge the exercise of discretion as being unfair and unjust. And I think there is scope for that because the law allows for, the law has a situation, the law as developed up to now says that there is no such thing as unfettered discretion. In other words, the authorities cannot say, well, you're out because, you don't satisfy this particular provision.
Yeah.
They have to give a reason.
Yeah.
And the reason can be adjudicated by the court to see whether is it reasonable, is it proportionate to the aim of achieving whatever the authorities want to achieve. So in short, it will be left to the discretion, but the discretion has to be exercised in a way that is fair and just. If it is not, that is the basis for challenge and to acquire citizenship on that basis.
Right. Adlyn, I want to go to you. So beyond the legal recognition, right? What sort of real life challenges do these families still face, particularly in documentation? What would be the next steps? What are some of the hurdles you are foreseeing, at least?
Okay, so this only became a legal case because there are real challenges on the ground, right? Mothers like myself, impacted mothers, we could not function. Think about it, right? When you're a new mother, you just gave birth. And this happened to me myself. I just gave birth. I was worried about, what type of diapers, formula, how to put the baby to sleep, But when you don't even get that first thing, which is citizenship for your child, all this doesn't matter anymore because you can't give the child the most basic protection, the identity, right? Papers. So this is why it's so important because, when the child is born, that's fine. When it really hits you is when you want to send the child to school. And I'll give you an example from myself as well. When my son was ready to go to Standard 1, I went to school and inquired, what is the process to register my son? And the administrators at the school said, tak ada masalah puan. No problem puan. Boleh. You can. But please wait for all the Malaysian children to be admitted first and then we'll check if there is a spot for your child. If there is a spot, we'll let him in. If not, sorry lah. So I said, okay, that's fair. How long will this take? Right? And they said, well, about 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on how busy we are. And for me, I was still able to accept that. But when they told me that, Puan kena repeat tau. Every year you have to go through the same process. And every year I would have to deal with the uncertainty of not knowing whether my son can even go start school. And I counted, right? I said, okay, if my son loses 2 months in a year throughout his whole schooling education, instead of having 11 years of schooling from Standard 1 to Standard 6, Form 1 to Form 5, he would lose 2 full years of schooling just from this, right? So you have barriers put in front of the mothers right away just because they don't have citizenship for their children, right? You talk about access to healthcare. I remember, kids, when they are sick, when they cry a bit, when they can complain to you, you're not so worried because, they can complain. It's when they are quiet, they can't even say anything. That's when you worry as a mother. And I remember it happened to my son one time. He was just out. He couldn't say anything. And we rushed to the hospital. And when I went to the registration, they said, okay, this one kena admit. But before you admit, kena bayar. And it was a very huge sum. And there is a saying in Malay. They say, sudah jatuh ditimpa tangga. You already, you put salt on the wound, and these are some of the real challenges that mothers face because we happen to give birth overseas. If it's the same set of parents, if I had just given birth in Malaysia, my child would get automatic citizenship, right? So now a lot of mothers are still facing this, right? As we know, the constitutional amendment hasn't passed. As we know, we just got this settlement in court. So a lot of mothers are still in this predicament. Their children still do not have citizenship. And we look forward to when they can finally get the papers in their hands so that they can actually just live a normal life, and just carry on, raise the kids well, take good care of them, take care of the family. Because this, Prof mentioned that this impacts children. When it impacts a child, it impacts the family. When it impacts the family, it impacts the community. So this just goes way beyond an individual family's issue. It's really such a big issue, and that's why I think the whole country, every part of the country was so touched and felt so connected to this topic.
So, in your personal opinion, what role should policymakers play to ensure that, the reforms last, especially when it comes to citizenship laws?
For the mother's case, right, a lot of people come to us congratulating us, saying, well done, good job, the constitutional amendment has passed. But a lot of people know that it hasn't been implemented yet, right? They thought, now automatic, I can give birth to my child overseas. No, not yet. So what policymakers should do is to ensure that this is followed through expediently, right? As soon as possible, so that mothers don't have to risk high-risk pregnancies to fly back to get automatic citizenship for their children, right? And this will only, I would say the constitutional amendment would only come to life when I hear the first Malaysian mother getting automatic citizenship for her child overseas. That's when we know that the policymakers have done their job.
I think if I can just add a little bit to the predicament. This was highlighted during the COVID-19 epidemic.
Families were separated, but people want to be together. And
yes, because the child is not a citizen, so he could not come into this country because there was a prohibition to non-citizens coming to the country. So the mother could enter the country, and the mother could enter the country where the child was born here, but the child who was not born here had to be left in, there's so many cases that left in Bangkok, left in Hong Kong, left in China, left in the Middle East, and so on and so forth. So that was a very serious kind of a situation, which then showed how serious this kind of issue is to Malaysian families. And as far as policy is concerned, I think, in my personal view, I think the government has to take a very comprehensive and broad look at the children who are denied citizenship for whatever reason. One is, of course, born overseas, which seems to have been settled somewhat, but also children born out of wedlock, also foundlings and so on. There are a lot of unwanted pregnancies, and people leave the child in a temple or in a dustbin or in a dispensary or something like that. And those people are there are a large number of cases of those young children as well, because they have no birth certificate. They're just left there and found by somebody. They're foundlings. So you cannot allow, a government cannot allow its citizens or its people born within the country and whose only nexus is to this country to be just, to be thrown into a bin.
Right. In reality, it's actually a growing epidemic if you look at it, right? It's not being attended to.
And there are no statistics. I mean, I don't know whether there are even, I know one organization is trying to map out, the statelessness issue in this country, but there's no official statistics. So it seems like as though it's being swept.
Suhakam published a report last year.
Right.
And it's very interesting because what they did was they looked at the number of birth registrations, right, for babies. How many children have their births registered, and they compared this against our census. How many children are there in a household and the country, right? And the number of birth registrations are far less than the actual number of children that are here physically with us. So what does that mean if you have birth registrations that are far lower than the actual number of people? That means where are the documents for these children? And they've taken into account, those who are non-Malaysians, right, on foreign passports. So what are these numbers? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the ratio is like, I looked at it, I think it was 1 to 4, 1 to 5. Very high.
It's very high.
But do you think that this victory sets a precedent for advocating other citizenship-related reforms, such as automatic recognition for children of stateless?
We touched about that, right? Whether it could lead to that.
Can it?
Can it though? Would you?
Well, in my view, it can, because first it shows that the government is taking cognizance of the fact that there is a problem that needs to be addressed. And so they've addressed it through an amendment, which is fantastic, because before that they just ignored it. And secondly, through the settlement of children who are not covered by the amendment. That means, the pre-amendment children, retrospective effect. So the government has shown a healthy attitude towards looking after children who are in this predicament. And so the next step is to extend that empathy to the rest of the children who are in the same predicament, who have no status in this country, but whose connection is only to this country. And so we are quite hopeful that the Minister, Datuk Saifuddin Nasution, I think he's sympathetic to this kind of a plight. And we know that members of Parliament, who are the legislators, by their unanimous support for that amendment, are also very sympathetic. So is civil society, a large number of civil society groups, because for this settlement itself, we had not only the plaintiffs or the appellants, in this case the mothers, as well as Family Frontiers, but we had a large number of NGOs who attended the case and were registered as holding a watching brief. And there were large numbers of them, sisters in Islam and women's organizations and children organizations and so on and so forth. And Suhakam also took a role in this settlement and were recorded as parties in at least holding watching brief. So I think there is a wide, there's a widespread, because of this case now, there's a widespread awareness of the plight and the need to address this plight. I think this is, I walk into coffee shops and, my bill is picked up by somebody in a far off table and so on and so forth. So I'm getting some
Sort of positive
unexpected benefits.
out of this, in light of this.
But the point that I'm making is that there's widespread support for this by this ordinary citizenry.
Right. No, it's interesting that you highlighted about the foundling situation. I mean, the stateless foundlings. These are often individuals that are very underreported. I would like to address in a sense whereby, because you're playing with children's lives here, and eventually if they are aged out, then they probably be lost in the system. If they're not registered in the system, what would that mean, right? With that being said, now that we've got this particular settlement, but what sort of complications might we expect in the situation if there are still bureaucratic delays or resistance that hinder the implementation of ensuring we have proper, robust citizenship laws?
When there is a contestation between the citizenry and government, the court is the bulwark, the court is the protection, as has been shown in this particular case itself. So as lawyers who act in the public interest, we do a lot of public interest litigation, we are quite alert to the fact that we need to act quite spontaneously and promptly in cases where we find that children are rendered destitute because of bureaucratic delays. Even for this particular case itself, they have to go through a process, right? Because you can't have, they have to renounce their citizenship, they must take oath of allegiance, they must fill out forms and so on and so forth. We endeavored to get them recognized as citizens by operation of law, which was a decision of the High Court in this particular case. But the final settlement says that they can only do it by registration and they have to apply. So there is a bureaucratic process that is involved. But what we, the Family Frontiers, and of course with our assistance if needed, intend to do is to ensure that it is a facilitative process that allows for prompt action, and that they apply through very standard templates, and they are accorded within a reasonable time the right of citizenship and the papers in relation to citizenship. And I think both Family Frontiers, the Attorney General Chambers and us will be in consultation to ensure that there is no, bureaucratic setback with regard to the acquisition of the citizenship.
So it's not an automatic like, yeah, there's a win, but there's still a lot of steps that needs to be done for mothers to actually go through before they can actually provide or confer citizenship on their children.
Yes, that's
so
right.
To speak.
But it's only a paperwork. So paperwork nowadays with digital and online and so on and so forth can be facilitated with ease. So that's what we endeavor, if there are any delays, to work out with the authorities, with the ministry, a process by which they are, because now the government has already recognized that mothers and children of these mothers in that position. So all they got to show is that they fall within that category. They're under 18 years of age. They were born within wedlock, and then it must flow. It must flow as surely as the sun rises every morning. Without having to declare any meteorological finding, right? That they must be accorded citizenship rights, and so there is also a provision in law which says that when we are required to do something where no time limit is specified, then it has to be within a reasonable time. So all this assists the quest for speedy and prompt grant of citizenship.
Right. Adlyn, so at least as the president for Family Frontiers, are you also looking at other cases as well?
We want to make sure that this case is followed through well, that it's implemented, right? Because we know a lot of mothers still have applications in process. A lot of mothers haven't submitted their applications. So we want to make sure that with this settlement, that SOPs, proper SOPs can be developed. Because when we engage with mothers right after the court, we found out that some of the embassies, like for example, the Malaysian embassy in Germany, was still giving mothers the wrong form. Now, if these SOPs are not developed properly, the checklists are not developed properly and not communicated to the embassies and the consulates, then the mothers might be submitting the wrong application in, and then it will be delayed, right? So
These are the factors.
these are the things that's happening on the ground. We want to make sure that this is followed through properly, it's implemented, and the children get the citizenship papers in their hands. That's what Family Frontiers is looking at right now. Now we also have the case of the constitutional amendment, which has already been voted on but hasn't been implemented. So we will be following up very, very closely with that. When are children finally going to get automatic citizenship? We don't have an answer yet. When will the law finally come into being? We don't know. We don't have sight of that yet. So we will be following up with that. And the third area would be, again, for children who have aged out. What about them? They deserve a place in our community too. And right now, we do not have a clear pathway yet for them on how they can be here with their families. I know there is one boy, I think he's in his 20s already, and he grew up here, from the time I think he was about 10 or so, and he was really good at sports.
Daniel.
He was really good at music, and he never got a chance. Why? Because he was born overseas and now he's aged out. What about him? And what about people like him? It's not fair. I am so lucky because, yes, I happen to give birth in the right time. My child's under 21. But what about mothers who didn't give birth on time?
Right.
It's not fair.
Yeah, Alina, probably bring to light this story about Daniel. How did it come to you?
I think Daniel's case, I think you would know better, Adlyn, what happened to him. But essentially, he aged out of the system. So he was born stateless, and he aged out. But I think there were so many stories of children above the age of 18 who have been trying. But my question also would be, for the process of applying for citizenship, and then when it gets rejected, there's no really a reason. They don't really give you a reason why it's rejected. Am I right? Because then you don't know what is it, whether your forms, whether you submitted the right forms or the wrong forms, whether you didn't cross the T, dot the I. So maybe, Adlyn, do you, based on your own personal experience on how you keep applying and how when it comes back and it's rejected and you don't know why?
Absolutely. And so many mothers go through this. So I applied on time. So I was supposed to apply for my son's citizenship before he turned 1. So I applied when he was a few months old. And I filled in all the paperwork. I gave all the required documentation with the right attestations. I completed the checklist. And 4 years later, I got my rejection. And tidak berjaya, And kalau puan berminat, puan boleh apply lagi. And it was so heartbreaking because I don't know what went wrong, right? I'm very meticulous in preparing such important applications, and yet it was rejected. And I didn't know when I applied again. They said, if you're interested, you can reapply. When I reapplied, I submitted the exact same set of documentation. And I thought, how is this application, second application, different than the first? It was exactly the same. Same set of parents, same birth certificate copy, same child. What's different now? He's just a lot older. I can't enroll him in school. And I don't know what went wrong, right? So this is the reality that hits a lot of mothers, that we don't have visibility to how an application goes through its process, right? And that is the thing why this SOP is so important.
But back to your question, Lola, about Daniel. So Daniel was born in Netherlands.
Yes.
And in 1998, he's 20, I think he should be in his mid-20s.
27,
Yeah, so he lived in Malaysia as a non-citizen since he was 12. So, he's aged out of the system. So he's here, he's in limbo. So his mom is a Malaysian, but she couldn't pass her citizenship to him. I think that's the long and short of his story.
His other siblings are Malaysian.
Yeah,
he's the only one.
The irony is his siblings are Malaysian.
But this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm trying to highlight.
Yeah.
Is like there are still pockets of our community,
Yes.
individuals who are being overlooked, and that's what we want to not have right? That's what we want to help address in this context.
If I could just add to that, I think the authorities, when you apply for citizenship by registration, there is an obligation on their part when they reject.
As you
to
mentioned
give-
earlier,
to
yeah.
give- to give the reasons.
The reasons.
And if they do not give reasons,
Yeah.
or they give reasons which, quite obviously don't measure up, then you can bring a case to court and have that adjudicated. And there is a more than even chance that the citizen, that rejection will be rejected, and that they will be required. We can ask for amendments, for example, and an order ordering the authorities to reconsider and apply and grant citizenship if all the criteria is met, because the criteria is very simple. And so this is the next point that we need, that SOP is one thing, that's the procedure to where you are entitled to it, but even those other cases of fondlings and people found and born out of wedlock and so on and so forth, there must be a clear process and procedure established for them to apply and for them to be given and for criteria to be developed for the grant of citizenship.
Right.
So that measured against that, if there is a rejection that is just given willy-nilly like this, as appears to have happened in the past, then there can be a challenge and can be an adjudication in favor of the child.
Right.
So I think that's the next important step that needs to be pursued after we sort this SOP for those who are already granted the right to citizenship.
I'm just curious, because we have like less than 10 minutes left, but I'm really, really curious in a sense. What is the ministry actually doing? How proactive are they in terms of ensuring that these individuals, their individual cases, are followed through properly? It's not like you wait for that particular person to come up front first, right? And just relying on the NGOs to help and aid and push for their cases, right? So what sort of gaps that we need to tackle here?
I think now what they are doing, until the settlement came about, what they are doing is on a case-by-case basis.
Exactly.
And they got a backlog. And then when you speak to the authorities, they said, look, we've got a backlog, be fair to us, we got to process it, and it takes time, and sabar and all that, But the fact of the matter is there has to be an overarching policy on which there can be a grant of citizenship when the checklist is, when there's a box checklist, and officers, not necessarily to go to the highest officer in that particular department, but the normal, regular, just like when we apply for IC, the process is facilitated, Even if you lose your IC, you can get it within an hour. So that process can be facilitated, and we in this Madani government have vowed to, work on a compassionate basis for our citizenry.
And cut through the bureaucracy.
Yes, so the bureaucracy has to be cut, because this is too precious a situation. It cannot be done on a case-by-case basis, because you do on a case-by-case basis, then the person who's right down the line will be aged out of life, not just aged out of life before he can even see any citizenship right granted to him.
Yeah, before having any sort of closure, right?
Yes.
Now
So you see, this is the point that sometimes when we raise with the ministry, this is what they say, don't worry, we're doing case by case. Do you know last month, how many cases we processed? Which is good, shabash, we say. Very good. But that's not the solution.
Yeah.
You can't deal with the backlog that has existed since the Constitution came into being, right?
Yeah. No, and also it's not just statistics, right? You're just not looking at it based on, okay, we resolved this number of cases and hello, congratulations. No, it's actually, you're actually meddling with people's lives. Yeah.
And we feel the need to have foreign migrant workers. Why? Because we don't have enough workers in our restaurants, in our retail trade and so on. And here, there are a large number of people, whose commitment is to this country, have not come from overseas to come and work in this country.
They want to be
there's a
here.
question of human resource. Why is the government not looking at these people as invaluable resource because their commitment and their roots are in the country?
Yeah. Why are we complicating ourselves with administrative issues, right? When we can actually resolve it properly. Okay, before we wrap up, I want to ask each of you here one question. What's the one message that you want to send to Malaysian mothers who are still abroad and they want to return but struggling with this particular issue? Of course, we start with Adlyn first.
Most certainly. I would say for Malaysian mothers who are overseas, please apply. If you have not put in your application, this is the time to apply. The government has given their commitment, they're willing to allow citizenship to be granted. Let's take the opportunity to put in the applications in, right? Now, we look forward to the SOPs and the checklists being streamlined so that when you do put in your application, that it is a complete application right from the start, right? You know that when you hand it in, you get your receipt number, good, everything's complete. That's what we want. So we call for mothers for those mothers who have already submitted their application, you have an application number, please check. Please check on it. Because a lot of mothers think, oh, I haven't heard back from JPN. No, please check. There is a web portal for you to go to. Check on the status, right? And if it's taking too long, let us know and go to JPN and ask why is it taking so long, right? Children are growing up every second. We have no time. So yes, put in your applications, follow up on your applications. If there are any issues, we are always here. Family Frontiers will not leave any mother behind. We stand by this cause until every child gets their right here in the country.
And one important addition to that SOP is timeline. From the time that you file in your application and the checklist is satisfied, there must be a certain timeline within which there must be a grant of the citizenship. I think that's very critical, so that people know there is certainty and don't give up hope, because many mothers are still overseas, so they can't be coming to this country to check every time. Go to Putrajaya. Some of them in the past, they have been waiting for 10 years. Some of them go to Putrajaya at least 5-6 times a month, only to be told, this form is not here, or the officer in charge is on leave, or can you refile your application because we can't locate it, and so on.
No, I do agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this has to stop, because as Adlyn has pointed out quite poignantly, the children are growing up, and they're growing up without a status, and they are also sometimes discriminated against in schools, for example,
Right.
because you're not a Malaysian. So all this has to stop. It can give rise to bullying. It can give rise to cyberbullying.
Alienation, basically, yeah.
Alienation and a loss of self-esteem by the child, when they feel, and the child, and there's a fragmentation of the family, as Adlyn has specified, because there might be 3 children. One child is not a citizen, and 2 children are citizens. And I was listening to the plight of a mother whom I was representing. She said, when I go to Sabah or Sarawak, to visit, one child has to go to some other counter, and he can't understand, he's a small boy, while his other brothers, his siblings of almost equal age, can go through with the mother on one kiosk. And it's heart-wrenching.
For the women who want to come back but still feeling very hesitant, what's one message that you want to say? Who can they turn to, at least?
In fact, since the decision, I've had a lot of calls from others, even from overseas, Middle East, India, and so on and so forth. My first message to them is that your first point of call is Family Frontiers, because they are in a position to facilitate and give the answers, because as lawyers we do not know the process. They'll ask, I've submitted Form B, is that correct or not? So I don't know how to answer that, except to say that B doesn't sound as good as A, maybe, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But other than that, the Family Frontiers have done a brilliant job up to this point, and I think they should be the first point of call.
Okay. Last words from you, Lena.
What struck me most, Adlyn, when you say the timeline, what is a reasonable timeline to wait when you have applied? Because I'm sure some mothers, and I'm sure you've even gone through it, it could have been years waiting for an answer. So I know the legal victory is a step forward, but it's not a full resolution. And Malaysia has a chance to right these wrongs, to build a system that reflects equality and justice. But until every affected child and individual is recognized and protected, I think the work for you remains unfinished at Family Frontiers. Yeah.
Right, indeed. And recognizing a child's right to citizenship is not just a legal case, right? It is actually a human rights issue. Families deserve certainty. They don't deserve bureaucracy. Now, unfortunately, this is the end of our episode. We certainly had a very insightful discussion so far.
Absolutely.
I'd like to thank my guests. Adlyn, thank you so much for being on Beyond the Headlines. Professor, thank you so much for being here as well. Hope to see you here soon in terms of updates. Don't be a stranger.
Thank you.
And to our audience back at home, if you do like this episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell if you haven't already. You'll not only get Beyond the Headlines update, other NST online news reports will be delivered to you. Follow us on X, Instagram, Facebook, as well as Threads. I would like to thank as well Alina Koshi for being here. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure being here.
Now, my name is Amalina Kamal, and I'll see you next week.